Hello, you're on Initiative Africa. My name is Asha Sampath. Welcome to this new edition of your weekly magazine featuring Africa on the move through smart innovations and initiatives that work. Let's get on with our show with our top stories today. The dialogue between France, Africa and its diaspora no longer holds any secrets for him. Sylvain Itté is the first French diplomat to serve as President Emmanuel Macron's special envoy for public diplomacy in Africa. A demanding role of exchange, mutual discussion with civil society, made particularly delicate since the crisis in Mali, the country where he was born. Can diplomacy really advance peace and understanding between people? The answer with our guest of the week.
What I can tell you, and having seen it through the hundreds of people I met in France and in Africa, is that dialogue is always positive and absolutely necessary.
Gabonese teenagers are passionate about football with a dream. Can go wrong. Beware of fake recruiters from European clubs.
If I have to speak of an experience during my career, I'd say it was when I got scammed by a fake agent the year before my trip abroad.
Achieving peace in a country in civil war is not impossible. This is what Zahra Langhi, the president of the Libyan Women for Peace platform, thinks.
Libya has always been my home. It actually has never left me or left my family, even though we were in exile for quite some time.
In Africa, thousands of young football players dream of Cristiano Ronaldo, Lionel Messi or even Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. So many players who have made a career in Europe. This is how Gabonese teenagers, ill-informed and lured by vague promises of lucrative contracts in European clubs, have become easy prey for bogus sports recruiters. But some awareness is starting to change this vicious cycle, as our correspondent in Gabon, Jean-Rovis Debani, has observed. Sibang is one of the poorest neighborhoods in Libreville. Here, football is the favorite pastime of young people. A dream for many, but also sometimes a source of disillusion. Atoms come here once a week for regular training sessions.
This is where I took my first steps. It's a mythical stadium that has seen a lot of footballers, at least the pride of Gabonese football. When I see the stadium, immediately I have the nostalgia that comes back to me about my first steps in the first division. They're unforgettable moments.
At the age of 14, Atem was already playing in first division clubs, with dreams of Champions Leagues in his head, until the day when some acquaintances contacted him to play in a French club. Around mid-September 2016, Atem arrived alone at the training camp at the Leonardo da Vinci Sports Park in Paris. He will never hear from his agent again. His parents had to pay for his return to Gabon. It was then that another agent contacted him, promising him a tryout at a French club. Atem would therefore give a lot of money to finance his dream of a contract in a second division French club before realizing that he has been duped again.
If I have to speak of an experience during my career, I'd say it was when I got scammed by a fake agent the year before my trip abroad. I'm certainly not the only one. My case is exposed today because I'm actually talking about it. I worked with an agent who promised me a trip abroad, and since I was already abroad, I wanted to leave immediately. I gave myself body and soul.
Even today, when Atem hits the ball, he's dreaming to shine far from African lands. In this academy, more than 250 young people, aged from 3 to 17, are trained free of charge. These kids are not immune to ill-intentioned agents. But here, access to training sessions is strictly controlled. The young people of this training center are informed, protected against false recruiters. At the head of Jardin du Football du Gabon, a former Gabonese international player, he always holds a preventive speech for these young players who are usually between 14 and 17 years old.
I am a former footballer. I know how it works. The rules today have changed a lot. FIFA controls everything at agent level. It must also be said that a boy will not leave my training center if I do not have all the guarantees, not necessarily financial, but above all, I'm still able to pay for a plane ticket to fly and see the conditions that my protege is going to face. I will be firm in the same way as I am in Gabon here, in the way I follow them at the international level, so it will be really difficult for one of my boys to leave Gabon while I have no guarantees.
At the international level, FIFA has indeed enacted a regulation prohibiting the transfer of a minor abroad if the conditions of education and housing are not optimal. According to Article 19 of the FIFA regulations on the status and transfer of players, the international transfer of a player is only permitted if the player is at least 18 years old. But for this, Italian promoter Daniel Del Piero, who crisscrosses Africa in search of young talents, flaws persist.
We
have very specific constraints in Italy. Anyone who is linked to us has an obligation to tie in there. Obviously, there are also the same kind of characters in Italy, the so-called agents, selling dreams to young children without ever achieving anything. Our academy is very serious. It is affiliated with the Atalanta Football Bergamo Club. It is serious and committed to enhancing the potential of our children. Our goal is therefore to prevent deceitful experiences for everyone, because we will act as a bridge between Gabon and Italy to manage the future of the talents who will eventually be able to play at the international level in the best way.
Fraudulent sports intermediaries, Lumiere and Gema knows very well this phenomenon. And according to certain sources within the Gabonese Football Federation, there are ramifications in Switzerland and Turkey. But for this recruiter, it is the legal vacuum which frames the profession of agent in Gabon, which is at the origin of this scourge.
I take this opportunity to appeal to the authorities so that we can now organize a program to allow everyone to practice legally, since in the Gabonese Republic there is no training of courses to allow someone to become a qualified agent.
Il n'y a pas de concours avéré pour permettre que X ou Y soit réputé agent. C'est aussi en réalité
It is also this administrative void that favors the infiltration of agents who are not in fact reputable nor qualified.
Now, 22 years old Atem has great hopes of playing one day in the club of his dreams and thus shine like many African footballers in major international championships.
How to enrich the relationship between France and Africa? This is the daily mission of our guest Sylvain Ité. This experienced French diplomat travels the continent, but also France, to meet African civil societies, but also the diaspora. These meetings have convinced him that mutual exchanges, cooperation, and the strengthening of economic ties are the key to the future of a Franco-African relationship that is sometimes fragile. He explained to Laurent Sustras how he envisaged this strategy after the withdrawal of the Barkhane force from Mali.
Sylvain Ité, hello. You have been President Emmanuel Macron's special envoy for public diplomacy in Africa since October 2020. As you were the first to have this role, how would you describe the job?
C'est effectivement une nouvelle mission qui m'a été confiée par le ministre des Affaires.
It is a new role, certainly, and I was asked to undertake it by the Foreign Ministry at the request of the President and the Élysée Palace. It was created because diplomacy has been evolving, and diplomats must evolve alongside in terms of dialogue and communication.
Nous avons constaté qu'il était absolument indispensable.
Especially in regard to communicating with civil societies. It also reflected a commitment made in 2017 by the President of the Republic towards Africa.
Dès 2017, en Afrique, donc mon travail consiste à aider et à accompagner.
My job is to assist our ambassadors in the different countries and in France with their dialogue with civil societies. The large diaspora in France of people who are of African origin makes up 10%, maybe more, of the population.
près de 10, voire plus de 10% de la population française qui est d'origine africaine. Donc il était important de pouvoir engager...
It's important to talk with this community, and I have been moving around the country, visiting 15 cities, meeting with these French or expat people.
La relation que ces Français ou non qui vivent dans notre pays
to see what they think of the relationship. That admittedly is a complex and sometimes a difficult one between France and the African continent.
Qui a été difficile entre la France et le continent africain. Et puis ma deuxième mission est également de lutter.
My second mission is also to help our embassies identify and fight against the manipulation of facts and disinformation, which is now widespread in Africa.
Qui sont extrêmement importantes en ce moment en Afrique. C'est vrai partout, c'est vrai sur tous les sujets.
It's true everywhere on all subjects, but there is clearly a resurgence, or at least an increase in false information on the African continent today.
Sur le continent africain aujourd'hui.
As part of your mission is dialogue with African civil society. What impact do they have in terms of influencing policy?
Ce serait difficile à vous dire aujourd'hui si ça a un effet.
It's difficult to say whether they have a positive effect and a real influence.
Simplement vous dire, et pour l'avoir constaté à travers les centaines et centaines de personnes.
What I can tell you, and having seen it through the hundreds of people I met in France and in Africa, is that dialogue is always positive and absolutely necessary.
Et qu'il y a beaucoup d'incompréhension, beaucoup de...
There is a lot of incomprehension, a lot of misunderstanding, which comes either from a lack of communication on the part of the French authorities, or from manipulation and misinformation, which lead to many inconsistencies and misunderstandings.
Qui ont entraîné de très nombreuses incohérences et de très nombreuses...
Therefore, it is always important and always beneficial to explain in person, to go and talk to people.
S'expliquer, que d'aller parler avec les gens. Pour vous donner un seul exemple, j'étais à Yaoundé.
To give you just one example, I was in Yaoundé this week. I gave a lecture to 150 young people from several countries at the Cameroon Institute of International Relations.
À l'Institut des Relations Internationales du Cameroun, qui est une espèce d'académie diplomatique.
Which is a sort of diplomatic academy, bringing together countries from the entire region. And it lasted 2.5 hours. They asked me questions on subjects which sometimes were not always easy to deal with. And what I see, not for the first time, is nothing replaces dialogue. Dialogue is essential to clear up misapprehensions. So, as far as that's concerned, I think it's extremely positive.
Je pense que c'est extrêmement positif.
Since your appointment, we have seen some West African states taken over by military juntas. What is your role in this context?
Mon rôle,
My role is the same, I would say, to continue dialogue once again with civil societies, the communities of these countries who live in France.
De ces pays qui vivent en France. J'ai de très longues conversations avec les différents représentants.
I hold very long conversations with the various representatives of the African communities of Mali, Niger, Cameroon, Senegal, and so on. It's in fact my opportunity to explain France's position towards these various political situations.
Situations politiques diverses et d'écouter également et d'entendre.
And to listen to what they have to say about it to us, or possibly reproach us about the French position.
Sur ce qui concerne les positions de la France. Donc c'est un travail.
My job is to explain. It's a mission not of persuasion in both directions. It's important to hear them, to listen to what they have to say, and I believe this also helps our political authorities at the highest level.
Également la réflexion de nos autorités politiques au plus haut niveau. Parce que ça leur permet de savoir.
As it informs them how a Malian who lives in Montreuil or a Guinean who lives in Rennes perceives the action of France in these countries. And besides, it's especially important to speak with these people because they themselves often keep in very close contact with their families and their villages back home. And their discussions are extremely important to learn about local public opinion as well.
Pour l'opinion publique qui se fait sur place également.
Last November, you were in Mali, and you were quite positive about the dialogue you had with Malians and civil society there. Since then, the France's Barkhane force has been withdrawn. As a result, how can France continue to develop and improve its relationship with Mali?
Le Mali est un pays qui a de relations avec la France depuis très longtemps.
Mali is a country whose relationship with France goes back a long time. I would also remind you the Malian expat community in France is the largest from sub-Saharan Africa. At least 400,000 Malians live in France, either of Malian or dual nationality.
Maliennes soient binationaux. Donc ce lien est, je dirais...
The link is, I believe, essential and won't be destroyed because of a few vagaries of history that we're seeing today.
À quelques vicissitudes de l'histoire que nous vivons aujourd'hui.
It's true to say the relationship with the Malian transitional authorities is particularly difficult. I think Malian society, civil society, is an extremely resilient, strong society.
Résiliente, forte. Le Mali est un grand pays.
Mali is a great country, with a great people and with a centuries-old history. The Dogon Empire, the Mali Empire, was one of the most powerful states in Africa. They have an extremely strong nationalist sentiment, and no one could blame them for that.
Et personne ne pourrait les en blâmer. Je pense que l'histoire...
I think history will prove us right. In any case, we consider the accusations against France to be unjust, unfounded, sometimes false.
Nous les considérons comme au minimum injustes, infondées, parfois mensongères. Et nous laissons le temps, comme disait notre ancien président.
And we'll give it time, as the former French President François Mitterrand said. Anyway, I don't think the special and historical relationship with Mali will be destroyed overnight.
Et historique avec le Mali ne se détruira pas du jour au lendemain, ne serait-ce que parce que les intérêts...
If only because both countries' interests are also linked.
Sont liés. Et que la communauté malienne de France...
The Malian community that lives here in France has no intention of changing its habits, and through its financial remittances, it represents nearly 7% of the gross domestic product of Mali.
Par ses envois financiers, près de 7% du produit intérieur brut du Mali. Donc, je crois que...
So, both sides will have to act reasonably. Let time do its work. Later, we'll be able to take stock of it all.
Et puis, nous ferons un bilan de tout ça un peu plus tard.
Welcome back to the second part of our show. How to prevent and combat extremism in a country in the throes of civil war? The question remains relevant in Libya, where two rival governments are vying for power. At the head of the Libyan Women for Peace platform, Zahra Langhi actively participates in the peace process by advocating mediation and dialogue. Would peace and security efforts be more sustainable when women are full partners in preventing violent conflict? This is what we tried to understand when we met Zahra Langhi in Cairo. Take a look.
Libya has always been my home. It actually has never left me or left my family, even though we were in exile for quite some time. The Libyan Women's Platform for Peace started as a movement back in 2011, even before Gaddafi was killed. So we came together, 35 women from different walks of life, and decided that women have to be and have to have an important say in the new Libya. And we wanted to have an inclusive transition that is based on transitional or restorative justice, that is based on rule of law, respect of human rights, and also where there is gender equality. We felt from early on that women were excluded by different factions, be it tribal, so-called civil liberal, but they are all patriarchal, and they see no place for women in politics. they only instrumentalize and use women for their own agendas. I always call it a gender paradox. We see women were at the forefront of the revolution and these uprisings, yet at the same time there was and still continues a systematic political violence against women. So there have been serious violations of women's rights in Libya during this transition by warlords, by militias, and now by mercenaries. So what we needed to do is to address the issue of militarization, of armed groups, how to disarm them, how to integrate them back into the society, and definitely how to address issues of violent extremism. I think Libya needs two things. It needs a resetting of all its institutions, because at the moment we have more of a kleptocracy, institutionalized corruption, and lack of legitimacy of its state institutions. And we can only do that through elections. We need to have a peace process that is people-centered, that brings the social and economic rights of Libyan people at the center of the table of negotiations. It's in order to have a meaningful and sustainable peace process in Libya, the process needs to be inclusive, not inclusive only of Libyan stakeholders, but also of regional and international stakeholders.
Let's get back to our guest, the French diplomat Sylvain Ittey, for the second part of his interview. The Special Envoy for Public Diplomacy in Africa was born in Bamako, the beginning of a close relationship with a continent who, he believes, cultural richness, spirituality and values, including family ones, should be an inspiration for Europe. Let's listen to him.
Sylvain Ittey, you were born in Bamako and you have served in several African states. What is your personal relationship with the continent?
Le fait d'être né à Bamako, au Mali.
The fact of being born in Bamako in Mali does not make me an African in the strict sense of the term.
Logique du terme, mais c'est un continent bien évidemment qui m'est très cher. J'ai vécu d'ailleurs.
But it is a continent that, of course, is very dear to me. I lived the first 5 years of my life in Africa. After Bamako, my father was posted to Côte d'Ivoire, then to Senegal. Therefore, my very early childhood, to the age of 5 or 6, was spent in Africa. I served as ambassador to Angola, as minister counselor in Cameroon, as chief of staff to the Minister of Cooperation. In fact, my youngest son was born in Cameroon, and I also have a son who was born in Yaoundé. For me, Africa isn't just a diplomatic training ground, it's simply part of my life. I am fascinated by the continent, like many other people. And like many of the French, we fall in love with Africa. We are attracted and fascinated by this continent.
D'ailleurs, et comme beaucoup de Français, on tombe amoureux de l'Afrique et puis on est attiré.
Through its rich culture and its spirituality and its family and other values that we have somewhat lost in Europe and from which it would be good to draw inspiration again.
Familiales et autres qu'on a un peu perdu en Europe et dont on ferait bien de s'inspirer à nouveau. Et les Africains ont quelque chose de tout à fait fondamental.
Africans also possess something quite fundamental. It's the ability to quickly sense the honesty, the sincerity and passion of those they are talking to.
Et donc
and I believe, I hope, they have noticed I'm not always soft on the people I'm dealing or speaking with, because I think Africa also needs to look at itself.
Je ne suis pas toujours tendre avec mes interlocuteurs et dans mon dialogue, parce que je pense que l'Afrique a a besoin également de se regarder. La critique envers les Occidentaux.
Criticism of Westerners and of France is sometimes legitimate, often justified.
Souvent fondée. Cette critique est constructive à partir du moment.
This criticism is constructive if you continue to love your partner. France and Africa are a bit like an old married couple, so they generally get on well. In any event, we have an inseparable destiny. Inseparable.
Absolument indissociable.
That's the point. Does Africa still love France? What do you think of the anti-French feeling that some fear developing in Africa, and particularly in French-speaking Africa?
Alors, effectivement, il y a deux questions. Il y a le sentiment.
There are two issues here. There is anti-French sentiment in Africa and in French-speaking
En
Africa.
Afrique francophone. Je crois qu'il ne faut ni le sous-estimer.
I believe it should be neither underestimated nor overestimated.
Nier le fait qu'il y a aujourd'hui un ressenti, un sentiment
And denying the fact there is rising anti-French sentiment in parts of Africa, in parts of African society, would be totally irresponsible. Yet saying anti-French sentiment exists and is widespread on the continent is to forget there are 54 countries in Africa.
De le nier. Dire que le sentiment anti-français existe est répandu.
There are many African countries where anti-French feeling not only does not exist, but where France is welcomed, respected and recognized as being an important player.
Où ce sentiment anti-français non seulement n'existe pas, mais où la France est attendue, respectée.
In the cultural as well as the political field, and the strategic arena too.
Comme dans le domaine politique, comme dans le domaine stratégique, à mon avis, c'est bien exagéré, mais il faut tenir compte.
I think it might well be exaggerated, but nonetheless, this feeling is a feeling of frustration among the younger generations who want hope and want to be able to evolve, to work and to lead better lives.
Qui veut avoir un espoir d'évolution et d'évolution, c'est normal, qui veut du travail, qui veut pouvoir vivre, etc. Et qui donc, dans ces moments d'angoisse...
Therefore, in these moments of anguish, of uncertainty, they need to identify and personify their anger.
Identifier et de personnifier sa colère. Et la France, en réalité...
And France is somewhat the catalyst for all these frustrations and anger today, seen as a symbol of the West. So it's something that mustn't be misunderstood, but that we must try to analyze calmly.
Méconnaître, mais qu'il faut essayer d'analyser avec le plus grand sang-froid possible.
What role can the diaspora play in this area?
Alors, elle joue, à mon sens, un rôle tout à fait essentiel, parce que
in my opinion, it plays a key role, because much of the diaspora is attached to its dual affiliation, to its African affiliation and to its affiliation to France.
Appartenance, à leur appartenance africaine et à leur appartenance à la France. Ils sont français et aussi autre chose.
They are French or something else.
Ces jeunes-là sont pétris.
These young people are shaped by their two worlds, their two cultures, and are driven by a desire to be able to act as the bridge.
Ils sont véritablement animés de cette volonté de pouvoir jouer un rôle justement de pont
between France, Europe and Africa. And this is an opportunity for France.
Ils sont en réalité une chance pour la France. Mais moi, je suis aussi convaincu que l'Afrique, en fait, a aussi...
But I'm also convinced that Africa also has a part of France in it. Hence the difficulty of the relationship, and hence the importance of talking to the diasporas and making them an essential player in all areas, cultural, economic, political and social, of France in Africa.
Essentiel dans tous les domaines, culturels, économiques, politiques, social, de la France en Afrique. Vous avez aujourd'hui plus de 25 députés.
Today there are more than 25 French lawmakers of sub-Saharan African origin, Senegalese, Rwandan, to name but two.
Rwandaises, etc. Et qui témoignent en réalité de cette double...
This bears witness to our country being a melting pot. It takes nothing away from us. Rather, I think it adds something. It makes France a country that has a huge advantage over the others.
Un pays qui a un énorme avantage sur les autres grâce à cette
thanks to the diaspora, which is a strength, a driving force, and should be considered as such, and be given the means to play this role.
Et lui donner les moyens de jouer ce rôle de force motrice.
Initiative Africa is over for today. You can of course find Sylvain Ité's interview and the replay of our programs on our news website, africaonair.com. And of course, you can also find us on all our social media channels. Feel free to share, like and comment with the hashtag Initiative Africa. And don't forget, next week, same time, same channel, I'll see you again with a new edition of Business Africa. Have a great week, everyone, and goodbye.